Now we are going to the fourth day. So tonight is the final night with Donald Trump being the headliner. If you were watching this in a vacuum without any context of what's going on in the world or even in the United States, you might think that the GOP has got it together, that they are the party of now, that they represent women and people of color, and that they are the party to build America back from this unprecedented crisis that we found ourselves in. But I was watching the convention, and I don't know about you guys. If you've been watching, please chime in. But I was watching this convention, and I was like, am I missing something here? It's as if the GOP has actively just totally shirked any responsibility for their failings or really acknowledge what's really going on in the United States. They talk about the economy in this way, where they talk about all the jobs they've created for people and for people of color and how great they've been for women. And yet they totally have ignored that due to their failed response to the coronavirus and their continued lack of a response to the coronavirus pandemic, that 51 million people filed for unemployment as of last month, and that we're facing one of the worst economies since the Great Depression. The GDP contracted by 33%. And Groovy John chimes in to say Republicans are liars and crooks. And Sandy D says, no, crazy is what's going on in the streets. And Sandy, I would love to address that in just a moment, because it is crazy what's going on in the streets. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But let's talk about this Republican Party, and we'll get into the law and order presidency. So the GOP, first of all, kicked off this week saying that they have no plans to announce a party platform. So this is a Republican Party that is saying we have zero plans and we are running on nothing other than Donald Trump, which is unprecedented. I don't think it's ever happened in history, and it's just so brazen. They're literally saying we have no intention to run on any kind of plan. So then they had Kimberly Guilfoyle and Don Jr., Donald Trump's son, and his girlfriend speak at the RNC night one. Now, their speeches were being compared to Korean propaganda, the Korean ministry propaganda videos, because they were, how do we say, deranged. They were shouting and using really hyperbolic language like Democrats are coming to take your liberty away. And they were screaming. And people were speculating that Don Jr.'s eyes were very glossy, that he was very animated, and that caused the hashtag cocaine to trend on Twitter, and Guilfoyle challenge was trending on Twitter, where people were mocking her performance, which was by any accounts strange. And the media does a weird thing. You know, people talk about media narratives and biases in media. The media does this thing where they depict Kimberly Guilfoyle's speech as impassioned, and I took great issue with that, because that is not an accurate representation of what was going on. And anyone who's watching it understands Kimberly Guilfoyle was out of her ever loving mind. And she was screaming this really insane rhetoric, coming for Democrats. They're coming for your liberty and don't let them take your liberty away. And it was really wild. So the media, let's learn from our mistakes from 2016 and stop with these false equivalencies where you have to paint these speeches as being something that they're not in order to have a counterbalancing narrative. Groovy John says Trump says he is the law and order president, but many people in his campaign are felons. We are gonna get there. We're gonna get there, Groovy John. So yes, the law and order presidency. So this is a theme that's a through line of the GOP this week and the RNC. The violence in Kenosha, Wisconsin has been a flashpoint for them. So, of course, Sunday night, there was a shooting of a young man by the name of Jacob Blake, a person of color, who was shot in the back 7 times by a police officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and this was captured on video and it went viral. And I think anytime you are shooting someone in the back 7 times who's unarmed, that is a murder. And that is not something that needed to happen. It was an excessive use of force. It was unconscionable. The governor of Wisconsin spoke up and spoke out about it. Governor Tony Evers has spoken out about it, condemned it. So instead of aligning with that and speaking out against police brutality, the GOP is using the protests that erupted in response to this killing, a murder, that happened and was documented on video. They are calling democratic cities as depicting them as descending into chaos, as being run by violent vigilante mobs, and that's just not really an accurate depiction of what's happening. There are people in the country who are speaking up and out about their lives being taken from them because of the color of their skin repeatedly, consistently, as a part of a systemic problem. And there's no attention being paid to the fact that 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse was arrested on Wednesday morning because he shot and killed two people and injured a third. This is a young white man, 17 years old, who shot and killed two of the Kenosha, Wisconsin protesters on Tuesday night, was arrested Wednesday morning, caught in another state. He was attempting to flee the state. This is a man who was carrying around a semi-automatic weapon and shot two people at these protests, and he's pictured at a Trump rally in January. He was at a Trump rally in Des Moines, Iowa in January this year, avid Trump supporter. I think it's worthy to note that the president of the United States, in this kind of alarmist sort of fear-mongering rhetoric about the mobs and the chaos that's taking over democratic cities, he's inciting this violence. Two people died. A third person died because this young man was so radicalized that he took a gun to these protests and decided to take it upon himself to execute justice. That's not right. And that the GOP has totally ignored the violence that they themselves have instigated. Moreover, there is plenty of evidence to suggest, and there has been reporting about this, that white supremacist extremist groups, white nationalist groups, called like the Boogaloo Boys, according to the FBI and others, are instigating violence at these protests in order to sully the reputation of the Black Lives Matter folks and to muddy the waters and to make it seem like they are causing violence, when it's really, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that there are white nationalist extremist groups instigating this violence. Now, law and order presidency. Trump, of course, and his entire administration is trying to claim he is the law and order presidency. We need him to restore law and order. Now, Trump is only the third president of the United States in history to be impeached, and he was done so in January of last year by the House of Representatives. And people forget that he solicited a foreign power to dig up dirt on his opponent and used taxpayer relief money as leverage to do so. And that was deeply illegal and unethical. And it's really rich to hear this administration talking about the law and order presidency. And what do you guys think of the RNC? We're going through the RNC and the law and order presidency. Now, of course, on top of that, the Manhattan District Attorney has just won the legal battle to obtain Donald Trump's tax returns in the course of his investigation into Trump and the Trump Organization for fraud. Multiple violations of the Hatch Act were committed this week. Lucia says it's scary what's happening right now. A 17-year-old with an AR-15 rifle. Exactly. And yet the GOP is totally absolved itself of any responsibility to respond to this. They don't want to take any kind of responsibility. They want to paint this as being the Black Lives Matter folks taking over the country. Isn't the Democrat Party also ignoring some of the extremist BLM movement? There is no evidence to suggest that the mainstream Black Lives Matter protesters are extremists. In fact, there is none. They are not extremists. Black Lives Matter is not an extremist group. The intelligence agencies have listed the Boogaloo Boys and other white nationalist groups like QAnon as domestic terror organizations, not Black Lives Matter. So that's just a false narrative that's being painted. You can't take one instance of violence and say the entire movement is about that violence. So, and there's plenty of evidence being instigated by the opposing side. Now, another topic that was brought up last night, a lot of people responded to it, that Trump loves women. White House advisor Kellyanne Conway made her final appearance as White House advisor. She is leaving at the end of August. Press Secretary Kellyanne Conway, they both invoked women's suffrage and Susan B. Anthony, and to talk about how great Trump has been for women, how he's been great for women's jobs and rights. And it's very important to note that 25 women have accused Donald Trump of sexual assault. And in response to Donald Trump's election, there was a landslide blue wave election in the 2018 midterms that saw a historic amount of women, Democratic women, being elected to Congress who ran in response to Donald Trump. So there was also the Access Hollywood tape, and of course the very famous grab them by the quote pussy videotape that came out while Donald Trump was still running for president. So this narrative that he loves women and is great for women is quite interesting. Lucia says, I think they are talking about another planet, not this one for sure. I agree. What if I said at the outset of this podcast, if you're tuning into the GOP convention from a vacuum, you'd be like, this is great. But it's like, if you're paying attention even a little bit to what's happening contextually, it's the GOP has lost its mind. So Conway was Trump's best liar. She is a very convincing liar, and her daughter has posted to social media saying that she is humiliated by her mother's participation in the Trump administration. Her own husband has spoke out against the Trump administration. So it seems like really awkward dinner conversation in the Conway household. So Trump, so the women president, I don't know. He also believes in punishing women for abortion and wants to turn back the clock on Roe versus Wade. So all in all, the Republican National Convention has been a real chaotic affair. Trump chaos has been trending on Twitter. And contrast that with what the DNC put up last week with Joe Biden saying, I might be a Democratic nominee, but I'll be a president for all of you, Republican, Democrat, Independent. Was a much more unifying experience. And I think that maybe this was the wrong tactic. The fear mongering and the divisiveness maybe have been the wrong tactic for the GOP, but we'll see. Let's look at what the polls do next week, the favorability polls, and see how Trump does in response to this performance this week. So GOP women are subservient, you their husbands, hiding behind them to keep racism alive. There's a sociology study about there somewhere. Trump Dashian, Nasty Woman, Truth on Fire. Excellent screen name. Deep Throat Circus. Oh boy. That's a very personal question. That's for me to know. So thank you guys for joining the AM Report with Alex Mahajer. For Haps News, the network of Now, we are live every weekday morning, 7:30 Pacific time, 10:30 Eastern, for your quick political news and headlines. If you like this journalism and want to sponsor it, please do. Visit us at haps.tv/@AlexMohajer and sponsor this journalism today. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we will see you tomorrow morning.